What's up, everybody? I'm Stan, and welcome to Detail Comics, where we go over comics in detail. This is the weekly one-shot where I go over an individual comic book topic, tell you a little bit about it, give it to you a little bit more backstory on a story or something like that. And today we're going to be talking about Ironheart Mk. So this is Riri Williams' Iron Man armor, what she developed at her MIT dorm room, and what its kind of powers and potentials are. But what we're really going to do is look at the origin story of Riri Williams, how she developed this armor, and what kind of capabilities it has. So let's start where we debut. So in Iron Man number 7, we see Riri in her dormitory, and just like a few panels, assembling what looks to be a copy of the Iron Man armor. There's monitors all over the background, and we get the idea that this genius has done something completely special. We then see her a little bit later on, where it's not necessarily her and her Iron Man armor, but it's really her and her friend discussing what she's actually assembled, what she's built, what she feels like she's been, she's meant to do at this point in time. And ultimately, we get a little bit of conflict between her and the administration, because evidently, in order to build this Iron Man armor, this Ironheart armor, she had to borrow some parts from places that she wasn't necessarily supposed to take them. But that's okay, because she's quitting MIT anyway, and she's busting out of the door. And that's when we first see Riri put on this Ironheart Iron Man Mark I style armor of hers. And that's really her debut as a superhero, so to speak. The next time we see her, she's flying out over the U.S. someplace, testing out the actual flight, and we see that the capabilities of the Ironheart Armor Mark I aren't necessarily up to snuff compared to, say, like Iron Man's armor. And this is where we get the designation that her resources, extremely limited as they are, she's a genius. She's extremely capable when it comes to putting these things together, but her resources are limiting the functionality and the ability of her actual armor itself. But this is where the situation, we know that it's a mechanized body armor, and now we see that it's got some sort of flight, propulsion, and navigation system. So this propulsion is fleshed out a little bit later on in Invincible Iron Man number 1, but let's just keep moving forward. So after we're done with this whole naming scheme that she kind of tries to come up with, we see her next land in the desert as she's trying to stop a bank robbery where an armored truck is barreling down, in pursuit by the police. And she just lands in front of him and just smashes the crap out of this armored car. And what we see is the kind of strength and capabilities of this actual armor itself. While the durability is a little suspect because it kind of blows off of her, the actual strength capacity is very impressive. Because if you take the weight of an armored car weighs about 55,000 pounds, and then it's moving at about 70 miles an hour, 70, 80 miles an hour, if you're talking about a high-speed car chase. So ultimately, she has a phenomenal amount of strength and power built into this armor, and that's only enhanced a little bit further when we actually see her first real conflict in Invincible Iron Man number 1. So now that we've covered the fact that it has flight, and now we've covered the fact that it has super strength, then we're going to have to deal with a few other things, because after this we kind of get the introduction of Tony Stark, because he's particularly impressed after he's notified of her ability to build this armor. So he shows up, he's talking to her about the specifications. She understands that, she really needs an AI in order to operate this, and he's rich, but he's not rich enough to kind of just give her one for free. So that's going to be a limiting factor that's going to play into the introduction of Riri Williams. Now we can kind of leave the original Iron Man side of the story, because the next developments come in Invincible Iron Man number 1, starring Riri Williams. When she lands and she starts taking on Animax, the mutant that can generate monsters from her own DNA strands, we see a few more of the capabilities. We understand in the heads-up display that it's showing some sort of jet propulsion turbine, so that way we can actually see that that's the means of her propulsion. It's not necessarily some sort of force energy blast, but it is much more of a traditional rocket jet-style propulsion system. We understand that her supercomputer, while it's homegrown and one of the fastest on the planet, it is not sufficient enough. It is not an artificial intelligence. The processing capacity isn't quite up to snuff for operating a mechanized armor or bodysuit like this. We do see that she does have standard repulsors on the actual palms of the armor, and those can produce zero-point energy fields, which are used to encapsulate, repulse, or to possibly attract other items. And that's kind of displayed a little bit later on. We do also know that the armor is bulletproof. We are not necessarily sure of its whole physical strength aspect, but we do know that it is much improved after when it got blown off by the armored car, because when she takes a blow from one of these giant monsters, she definitely holds up and it has that kind of durability. One of the things that we do find is that she's got some more experimental tech in there. Using that zero-point energy, she creates a situation where the gauntlets fly off of her hands, levitate, and then can be navigated by the computer system in order to contact their counter opponent. So as far as Mark I's concerned, because she insinuated earlier on that it was based off of her retro engineering or reverse engineering Iron Man Mark 41, which is kind of like a really odd reference for it because it doesn't look anything like it, it doesn't seem anything like it. She has taken the inspiration, and ultimately she is starting at a much better place than where Iron Man started off on this. However, her biggest hindrance is her resources, because she doesn't have the financial capacity, she doesn't have a facility that she can use, she doesn't have unlimited access to resources, so she is extremely limited into what she can create on this kind of budget constraint. And then she's also limited by her ability to develop this technology, and that is going to be the artificial intelligence, which is completely solved for her at the end of Invincible Iron Man #1. And this is a video that I wanted to do because this is probably one of the last times that we're going to see the Mark I armor in practice, unless there's some sort of issue that happens down the road, because this is Genesis. This is the beginning of the Ironheart character. And just like Iron Man coming out of a cave, dressed up in what looks to be like a tank for a man, shooting fire and whatnot back in the day, this is her situation like that. And I really wanted to kind of give the Mark I armor its due. So that's the history and description of Riri Williams' Ironheart Mark I armor. But I want to know what you guys think. Did I miss anything, or are there any other capabilities that might be showing up in the next few issues? I'm really interested to see what you guys have for theories. So hit me up in the comments down below and we can talk about that. As always, if you like what you see, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe right there to get more news, reviews, and commentary on comic books, comic book movies, comic book TV shows and games, and anything and everything inside the world of comics.